I'm here to also tell you about why you should read Nilanjana Roy's The 100 Names of Darkness and The Wildings. So, sorry, I'm going to refer to my notes a lot because I have stage fright. So, it's an old affliction that writers have. They try to imagine their way into other lives. And some go beyond that. Some try to imagine their way into lives that are still unknowable, that are still mysterious, like the inner and moral lives of animals. Why is The Jungle Book still such a compelling novel? Why is Tom and Jerry such an enduring part of our childhoods? And then when we grow up and become cool, why do we like Neil Gaiman's books so much? Why do we like The Life of Pi? In many ways, these are lessons. They're lessons in coexistence. They're lessons in observation. They are important imaginative exercises. And not just that, they are exercises in empathy. So in the first book, The Wildings, we're introduced to a group of cats in Delhi's Nizamuddin. Now, for those of us who are not familiar with Delhi's Nizamuddin, it's a very important part of Delhi's geographical, cultural, and political history. It's one of Delhi's most longest continuously inhabited neighborhoods. And in 1947, after the partition, Nizamuddin became the place where a lot of refugees from what is now Pakistan found shelter. So it has echoes of shelter, it has echoes of belonging. So these are the among the few things that Nizamuddin is known for. I'm also going to be asking Nilanjana to discuss that. But having said that, the cats in Nizamuddin, this clan of cats, one day they are suddenly disturbed and alarmed by the arrival of a small and strange little kitten. So in the world that Nilanjana has conjured, animals can communicate with each other telepathically, through both verbal in a way, but verbal and non-verbal ways. And with cats, what they do is they communicate through their whiskers. They form what is known as a link through their whiskers. It's like a web through which you can pass on information. So one day, these cats are appalled to find out that there's somebody else on their link, and they're overawed, and they're initially very hostile to this new kitten, until one of them says, maybe this is a sender. A sender, in the books, is a cat that is able to travel really long distances through the power of their whiskers. They have really long whiskers, and this is how they travel across geography, across species even. So, and the thing is that the sender appears only when the clan needs someone to save them. They're in trouble. So then they realize that, okay, Mara is our sender. Mara is Nizamuddin's sender. Okay, so in a nutshell, this is how it begins. It's an exciting intro, and this is Mara's introduction to Nizamuddin and introduction to herself as a sender. So I'm not going to give away much because I'm also going to exhort you to read the novels. She eventually, she gets adopted by humans, and humans are called big feet. That's all they are. They're big feet, and she, in addition to being adopted by the big feet, she also gets introduced to the various cats and various animals in Nizamuddin one by one. And towards the end of the novel, there's a big fight. There's a pack of ferals that attack the Nizamuddin clans, and Mara saves the day. Sorry, I gave away the ending. But Mara saved the day in both books, because in the second book, the Nizamuddin cats have to face a much bigger foe, humans, and the loss of their territory. So, having given you a very brief, and I hope a vague idea, I say a vague because I want you to read the books and enjoy them. Having told you what it's about, I'm going to tell you why you must read the books. It's because these two books are about geography just as much as they are about cats. It's about how the city of Delhi is changing, how it has changed, and how animals have kept up with those changes, how they have coexisted with those changes and despite those changes. So there are lots of really sweet and really interesting animals. There's a squirrel called Jethro Tail. There are a pair of squirrels called Ao and Jao. An absolutely lovely dog called Doginder. So, what they don't teach you at school is that geography is how geography and power are related. So if you control geography, you control who is in power. And you will learn this in another subject. It's called history. So you understand why the British are where they are now. It's because they control such a significant part of the world. So cats are just as territorial. So it becomes increasingly important for them to understand how to manage a territory that is rapidly shrinking. So
I'm so impressed, though. She said she has stage fright, and this is how articulate she is with stage fright. I don't want to see what she's like without you. I'm so impressive. Thanks for that. That's an extremely generous introduction. But I'm just looking out at the audience, and I was wondering whether I could just intervene for a second to ask a few questions. Is there anyone out here who likes cats? Okay, a few hands going up and a few more emboldened by them. Is there anyone out here who secretly wants to be a cat? Okay, there's a couple of ambitious people out there. That bodes pretty well for the discussion, but I promise you that we'll also move a little away from the subject of just cats and their lives and into something that's very familiar for all of you. The question of, who a city belongs to, whose stories actually tell the history of a city, and sometimes that's also the inhabitants who are less easily seen. And I guess the one thing I just wanted to add to what you said was that writing The Wildings was unexpectedly joyful for me. And I think a lot of that joy just came from feeling for a second liberated from this human shape and form, and getting a sense of what the world's like if you're either 4 feet off the ground, or if you're up there flying around the ceiling fans and watching your view of things change.
I'm going to ask you to expand on that. So just to quickly wind up my pitch for why this book ought to be bought and read. This is, as Nilanjana was saying, was that, what this book does really well is that it challenges that awful and wildly inaccurate idea that the world belongs to us, that the world is made for us, that the world is made for man and only man. So in the book, part of the early education that a lot of the animals receive is how to coexist, how to adjust, what are the terms of the adjustment. And, you do that sort of education when we're that young, it doesn't even happen to us. I mean, all we know is that, okay, if there are lots of trees, that's a botanical park. If there are lots of animals, that's a zoo. So this is, I absolutely loved that, and I thought it was very, very important. So I do, when I'm not working, I do a lot of volunteering at a local veterinary hospital. So there's a lot of rescue and adoption that we do, but after reading the book, I also realized that also hubris in a way to say that I've rescued this animal, I've adopted this animal, because in many ways, if you adopt an animal, it's actually adopted you. The reason it continues to be in your life is that it's because you have earned its trust, you have earned its respect. So, and to say that, you have rescued an animal, it's also, because it's actually rescued you. And what has it rescued you from? From those two incredibly self-defeating traits of humans, which is apathy and self-absorption. Which is why when you go back to, after you read these books and you go back into the real world, you'll find yourself questioning how these animals survive despite them completely not even figuring in any imagination of what progress looks like. So, for those reasons, I think this is an extremely compelling book, and I think that it's important to read a book that takes such an unsparing view of the human race for reasons as crucial and critical as a cat. So with that, I'm going to ask Nilanjana to read from the 100 Names of Darkness.
Thank you. From where Mara encounters a gentleman stray dog who rejoices in the name of Doginder Singh. And usually, novelists say that your characters are not based on a true story, and this, I have to confess that there was a real Doginder Singh. Since there's only us, I'm just going to come and sit here and do the reading so that it feels more like you have Doginder. I think I'll join you here. Yeah, you do that. Yeah, I was feeling like it was very far off and everybody was very distant, and then you feel a little scared. So, Doginder meets Mara by a car. Mara clung to the tire which had begun to feel like her only source of stability in a swiftly tilting world. This is the first time ever that she's gone out of her big feet house, and she's really not prepared to take on the world, let alone random stray dogs. She made a tiny and pathetic figure as she crouched by the car tire, and Doginder felt his spirits rise. Here was a chance to show the squirrels that he was serious about his duties as a member of the neighborhood watch squad. True, the squad had only 2 members so far. Doginder brushed away the niggling voice that said that the black beetle wasn't really a member, because the fellow hadn't objected when he was recruited, had he? He didn't say, no, I'm not part of the neighborhood watch squad. But all big movements started small, he reminded himself. He wondered if he should chase the little orange cat, perhaps just as a reminder to the squirrels that he was really a ferocious attack dog. But his hunting instincts refused to kick in. She was such a small, quivering scrap. He resolved nobly. Doginder changes his views according to the situation. He brushed a stray bougainvillea off his flank, and he said he would be a rescue dog. Perhaps she'd lost her clan and needed to be led back to them. Perhaps she might want a neighborhood watch member to show her the sights of Nizamuddin. Doginder brightened, and his tail went up as another thought struck him. Perhaps she might even want to join the neighborhood watch. He bounded towards the kitten, barking his greetings, his tongue lolling out in a big happy smile. Mara watched the slavering beast approach with a shudder. Those wicked teeth, that killer's smile. She wondered if it would hurt very much being eaten. A bus thundered by, juddering as it went, and she realized that she was trapped. "Hello there, cat," Doginder said genially. The orange cat stared at him, her green eyes growing larger and larger, and then she wailed into his surprised face. "Kill me now," she cried. "Excuse me," Doginder said, deciding he couldn't have heard right. "I can't stand this suspense," the kitten said. "Just strike me down with that horrid paw of yours already and rend the flesh from my poor bones. It's cruel to keep your victims hanging like this." "Victims?" Doginder said, his woof anguished. "Here, no, you've got it all wrong." "Woe," said Mara, her whiskers spread to their full extent. "Oh, woe is me to die like this, so young, before I have seen anything of the world at the paws of a hardened, vicious, savage killer. What, said Doginder, me? No, never harmed a cat in my life. Chased a few up trees, yes. All self-respecting dogs have to do that. But I'm a ferocious attack dog. I'm not a vicious, hardened, what you said. Here, said Mara, who had a tendency to get carried away when she was excited or sad. Rend my throat mercilessly if you must. Woe that I ever left my house. Woe that I ever abandoned my big feet. Woe to this road and the ugly beasts on it. Now wait, said Doginder. My tail is a bit on the fluffy side, it's true. And I'm not one of those pedigreed chaps, yes? But ugly, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? Ugly? Really? Lost, cried Mara, persecuted by big feet, hunted by nasty traffic, and at the mercy of a vicious, savage killer. Why did I ever leave home? This is the end. Oh, said Doginder, dazed. Mara's sending had twanged through the air, shaking the bats in the old monument in the park awake, bringing even the squabbling of the squirrels to a sudden hushed pause, reaching all the way down to the pigs at the canal. He had to shake his ears vigorously. At such close quarters, he'd received the full force of the sender's powers, and he was wondering whether it was time to disband the neighborhood watch. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Nilanjana. No, do you mind if we just sit here? It's a lot more informal. Okay, so since you've already told us how it all came about, what I wanted to know is that in one of your interviews, you've talked about how you had to do a lot of eavesdropping in order to sort of get the traits and the very specific tics and characteristics of a lot of these animals. So can you tell us what sort of research and what sort of eavesdropping did you do?
Have you ever followed a cat or a dog around for a day? You know, the wonderful part about writing a story like this is that you can just give yourself permission to do this and you put it in an important sounding folder that doesn't say stuff, it just says research. So, you know, to appease my conscience, I went off and I actually read a few, whatever papers I could find on stray cats and the behavior of black kites, who turn out to be ridiculously family-minded, by the way. And I looked at cat skeleton structure, but most of it was turning myself into Nizamuddin's eccentric, which is actually a difficult position to fulfill because Nizamuddin is an old, ancient place that has had eccentrics around since the 14th century pretty much. So the competition is fierce, but I made it. What happened is that I decided to follow a local Tom around, the one who became the prototype for a swaggering guy called Qatar in the book, you know. And Qatar's a conscientious Tom, but he's also got a little bit of, you know, I'm out here to have adventures, I'm the cool guy, I know the whole place, I'm going to make sure that everything's fine. So I start off following the local tomcat around, and after about 500 meters, he gets really nervous. So he sits down and he starts to wash his paws, and he's like, we're not going anywhere until this strange Bigfoot person stops stalking me. So frantically, I called up my vet. And I said, okay, I'm trying to follow a cat around. My vet knows me really well. He's seen us bring in lots of strays. So he didn't bat an eyelash. She's like, okay, she's following a cat around, as one does. And I said, how do I make sure that he doesn't get spooked because he seems not to want me on his trail? He said, see, what you have to do, you can't drop to all fours. Can you? Are you in a place where you can drop to all fours? I said, not sure this is going to go down well with the neighbors. So he said, okay, in that case, what you have to do is you have to kind of hunch over and hang your hands down to your knees and just, you know, look non-threatening. So I did that, scared a clutch of an Afghan refugee family, 3 grandmothers sitting in the park, but on the other hand, the cat got up and I started to walk after him again. And so this was basically how research was conducted. The worst part of this was that a lot of it had to happen at night. And Delhi being unsafe at night, if I was stepping out after 10 at night, which is when, of course, cats do maximum roaming, So there was me, and then there was my patient husband, also, kind of hunching over and doing the hands near knees thing. So the neighbors just assumed that we were the local pagals. But on the other hand, what we discovered was that every night at about 2 or 3 in the morning, you'd have this little community jagaran thing going on. And usually it would happen at the old abandoned stepwell, the Bauli, where clusters of cats would suddenly converge between about 2 and 4:30. And some of them, the young toms would go through this posturing, we're going to fight here, we're going to fight. No, we don't actually want to fight because, last time my fur got pulled out and that wasn't pleasant. Yeah, but just do the bristling thing, just do the noises, and all of that. And on the other side, the older queens would be sitting there saying, do we have enough provision? Okay, who's pregnant? Oh God, she has 6 babies every time. That knocks our arrangements out and all of that. And in the middle of it all, you notice that the canal pigs join in, and you notice that the stray dogs seem to leave these guys alone. Obviously, there's an ecosystem out there. And, basically that's where a lot of the Wildings grew out of. I think the most, can I be sheepish about a cat book? Okay, I can be sheepish about a cat book. But I think the biggest confession I have to make is that I didn't actually make much stuff up, A lot of it was things that happened. There was actually a bandicoot invasion that threatened the golf course for years. And then they secretly brought in cats. Secretly, because if they brought them in officially, then the cats would have had to go on the golf club rosters or something, because the golf club is very golf clubby, And I guess I just grew fonder and fonder of this completely non-human world, By the end of it, I think the only downside, if you ever want to write a cat book or a leopard book or a monkey book or whatever, the only downside is that you become really strange at parties, because after a while you've got used to, the urban monkey clan, right? And the cats who swagger and the cats who are very shy and the ones who are sitting there saying, I can actually fight the dogs if I wanted to, but, they've been around for a long time, I'll let them alone tonight, So then you walk into a party or you walk into a literary festival dinner, and you're looking around at people and you're thinking, oh yeah, that's the langur who starts all the trouble by throwing banana peels around. Yeah, I know you.
Okay, so as you got increasingly sucked into this non-human world, was it easier or more difficult to write about non-humans?
I think you approach that, okay, I'm going to be serious for once, which is difficult, but I think you approach that actually respectfully. What starts to open up is you understand how little any of us actually knows about species. Much later, I made a few rudimentary errors about tigers, but tiger experts were very kind about it. But I think one thing I realized is that anyone who studies animals tends to spend years and years in the field actually getting to know them. It's no different from humans. It's not easier or more difficult. But I think you realize that every animal has its own individual character. You can't quite call it personality because we reserve that word for ourselves. And you realize that in a city, the way that they interact with each other is very different from the way that they might react in a completely wild landscape. So, the cats of Delhi, in fact, even in Delhi, the cats of Nizamuddin don't behave the same way as the cats do across the river. There's little subtle tribal differences. And after a time, I think you're a little humbled by the idea that we put such a premium on getting to know our own species, And increasingly, writers who are much better than I am, way out there like Barbara Kingsolver or Richard Powers, increasingly, there's been a wave of writing about the non-human world, bringing to it the same care and attention that you would with humans. So if you're writing a book about trees, for example, I noticed one thing about Chandigarh when I was walking around today. The trees in this area have deep root linkages, which means that in effect, one of the reasons why this particular neighborhood might feel so friendly is that all your trees have deep connections that run for kilometers and kilometers. And as humans, you may not be aware of that, but you sense that. It's a very different feeling from when your trees are cordoned off in concrete pots and don't speak to each other. Little things like that.
Oh, that's fascinating. I didn't know that about the trees. Okay, I want to ask you about the morality of some of your characters. So in both the books, there are the bad guys are very clearly marked out. In the first book, it is a clan of feral cats led by a white cat called Datura. And in the second book, it's this invasion of bandicoots, which apparently really happened. So now I want to ask you, why are the villains in the books so villainous, you know?
Again, I can't really take credit for that. We had a very sad experience, not in Nizamuddin, but in a part of Calcutta where somebody had gone a little mad over the years and locked himself into one of those old rambling houses with about 40 feral cats. And the saddest part of it was that over time, the cats went insane as well, you know. Their only reaction when they were finally released was to either try to kill everything or to hide, because they'd grown so unused to open sky and all of that. So Datura and his clan are definitely the villains of this book, partly because, again, there was an almost situation that blew up in Nizamuddin one terrible year when we found that every kitten had been killed. And again, it was a situation where the culprits were feral cats who'd been locked inside for a long time and who had reacted to that the way people do if they're held in isolation cells. They go completely insane. But you know, even with Datura, I think some of my sympathies also stayed with him. With the bandicoots, you have another you'll have to stop me talking about this because I find this part of research fascinating. But if you look at rat colonies or bandicoot colonies, they depend on a reasonable degree of predators actually bringing colony populations down for their sanity. If their populations, rabbits again, if their populations go out of control, it's like there's a hive mind or a herd mind, and they collectively go slightly insane. Sometimes that insanity turns in on itself. So you'll have a bandicoot burrow that's been stable for 15 years, and suddenly as the population blows up, they start to attack each other. The really crazy part of this is that this phenomenon, you know, with populations turning and attacking each other, is also seen in humans. If you crowd humans together in limited space, or if you cut off their access to community spaces where they can mingle, their behavior changes. So I've always found that fascinating. And here, of course, it's very lightly touched on. But again, it was just so striking to see bandicoots who behave differently from the jackal packs, for example, at Tollygunge Club. Tollygunge Club has a huge population of golden and black jackals who are completely wild, but because their population stayed down for various factors, local predators, etc., they've always been almost as friendly and caring to each other as dogs. In any year, when they start to attack the young jackal pups, then the club guys start to sit up and say, okay, we need to do something about the population, do a round of sterilization and all of that, you know.
Got it. Now, what you'd said about how populations eventually turn in on themselves when they're, packed in, you can almost see that in Delhi, you know, because increasingly a lot of these community spaces are being either privatized or they are being cut off. So it's a really suffocating city at times. But it also brings me to my next question, which is that, in one of your articles about the books, you have described the Wildings as a love letter to Delhi. And because I live in Delhi, I know that Delhi is a horrible city for animals. And you've also brought that out really beautifully in the books, how the animals struggle to survive. So could you discuss the locations that you have brought out in the books and what the city did.
Okay, those are great questions. And again, I have so many questions that I want to ask you after this about the way you see cities and open spaces. But if you notice, through the festival, we've had this running thread of ambiguity about the cities that we inhabit. Some people feel very strongly and quite rightly that Delhi has also been home to so many strays. It always takes people in as much as it is harsh and a hostile environment. And with Chandigarh, again, I hear people defending it and saying it's a young city, give it time to develop its own culture and to grow deep roots in its own particular way. I was at odds with Delhi for years. I came to it after Calcutta, and I think I hated being in college, having to, take the youth special and actually fight for space on the roads with men. I also hated how cruel it was to a lot of the people who moved here. The wave after wave of displacement with slums, and then you see the same pattern repeated with urban monkeys. So you treat your humans and you treat your animals the same way with a lot of hostility. But under the surface of that, there was a lot of human kindness. I found that in neighborhood after neighborhood, and my family and I moved about 13 times in Delhi when I was young for complicated reasons. And then my husband and I think, changed houses, I think literally again 12 or 13 times. In neighborhood after neighborhood, you'd find out that when people got to know somebody who'd moved there, usually within about 2 months or so, no matter how foreign or strange they seemed, there'd be this phenomenon which I think of as people saying, "Par apna ajnabi hai," this is our stranger. And a kind of protectiveness would come in. This is again anecdotal, so I don't have evidence to support this, but I think Delhi's poor, the people who have the least, are the ones who often are the kindest to animals. I mean, they are the ones who will find one extra roti at the presswalas, or you'll see a lot of the homeless people and a lot of the pavement guys making time out in the day to, you've got one sliver of soap and you'll wash the dog as well as yourself. So that side of it is where I finally came to the acceptance that whatever it was about Delhi, it had shaped me. I'd only seen the harder and more aggressive parts of the city, but it was also the city where doors opened and where I began to become a writer. I met writers and was welcomed, and I found that, again, it has a reputation for being insular, and maybe these days it actually is. The literary community is more close than it used to be. It used to be a city where all it took was you sat down at Triveni Cafe if you were new in town, and over the course of a couple of days, you met writers, and on the day they said, "Okay, no, we won't pay for your chai, you feed us some keema paratha." That was it, you were accepted. You had found your tribe, whether it was in Hindi, Urdu, or English. I'm a little sad it's no longer like that, but with that heritage, then how can you not love a place, And it also gave us the cat family, and currently we have a little bit of a problem with the peacock that actually lives on our neighbor's roof, but has taken up residence temporarily on our roof. And she's a peahen, actually. And she's very well behaved, except for one thing. She's been stealing all the tea napkins. I don't know what she wants to do with them. Maybe she just likes the lace or whatever. But if you come to my house and you are served tea and there are, oh my God, no napkins, it is not my fault, blame the peahen.
Okay, I'm just going to... time? Yeah? Okay, I'm just going to ask you, so the two books have been translated into many languages. Now, what happened to the books in translation?
Thanks for asking that, and I'll try and keep it short. It changed a lot depending on the language it was translated into. I can't read all of them, but for a while I was surprised because when it was translated into German, I got very serious questions from academics who said, "You find political allegory of struggles between people of different castes and religions." And I was like, but wait a second. Where did you get that from? And obviously, there was something in the translation that went that way. In Spain, it was seen as a swashbuckling adventure story. And in Italy, I think it was seen as something in between. You know, they love cats. So there they saw it just as a kind of non-fiction memoir of Delhi cats. And they immediately, in Italy, if you go there and they discover that you wrote this book, they will immediately pull out their wallets and bring out pictures of cats the way other people bring out pictures of their children and stuff. But the weirdest experience I had, though, was with a movie deal that thankfully didn't come through. You know, I know a lot of people want their books immediately to be made into movies, and I wouldn't be unhappy if that happened, but that wasn't the goal. And then I get a call from a scout one day. And he said, we really love the Wildings and we want to make it into a movie, but there's a few changes. I said, yeah, sure. He said, you see, Delhi as a location, I'm not sure it's going to work. I said, okay. You see, because it's too Indian, and right now, have you ever thought of setting it in something like London or Paris or something? I said, well, actually, it's set in Delhi because these are Indian cats. He said, I was just coming to that. Indian cats, we were just wondering, would you be okay with them not like being so Indian? So I said, you don't have a problem with them being cats, do you? He said, about that. Actually, dog movies work a lot better. And I said, this sounds fascinating. Why don't you talk to my agent and I'll get back to you on this. And so far, it hasn't been made into a movie, and I'm very grateful for that.
Thank God for that. Will there be a third Wildings book?
Well, the next book, I think, is a different work of fiction aimed at adults. And another book that just accidentally grew out of the more stuff folder. But after that, I think there might be, if not a return to Mara and her daughter Monsoon, I think there might be some stories set in the Wildings world. They've been sitting in the even more stuff folder.
Well, I look forward to it.